His first contention, again, that there are basically three examples of the Nazis, the German Nazis, adopting leftist ideas from the American Democratic Party. I'll tell you why he decided to do this. He's like everybody else in the right wing, fed up with the allegation that racism and all this has its home in the Republican Party. It's the exact opposite. Racism, segregation, all of this. These were all Democrats back in the 1960s who were trying to violate civil rights and keep blacks out of universities. All those governors and Bull Connor, the police chief, turning the fire hoses on African-American protesters and Martin Luther King. They're all Democrats. And D'Souza is, like many people in the right, frustrated with his history revisionism. So he decided to write the book and do a movie about how it's even worse than that. And his first example here is how Hitler stole from the Jacksonian Democrats of the 19th century.
Hitler remembered that in the 19th century, the Jacksonian Democrats, despite the existence of all these treaties with the American Indians, essentially decided to violate the treaties, throw the Indians off their land, drive them further west, so displace them, resettle that land, and if any of the Indians remained, either kill them or attempt to enslave them. And so Hitler goes, this is a fantastic idea. I don't need to go to India like the British. I'll just conquer in Europe. I'll throw the Poles off their land, the Slavs, the Eastern Europeans, the Russians. We'll resettle that land with German families, and if any of the natives stay back, we'll enslave them. So this notion, the historians call it Lebensraum, which means living space, but it's basically German expansion in Europe. Hitler got the idea to do that from the Jacksonian Democrats of the 19th century.
As we talked to him, I said, wait, is this just your interpretation? Are you looking at events that happened in America in the 19th century and then comparing events that happened in Europe in the 1940s? Are you drawing a connection? No. The Nazis acknowledged this, he said. The historical record is clear. The Nazis acknowledged where they, quote unquote, learned this stuff. And his point here was that when he saw how the Jacksonian Democrats dealt with Indians, Native Americans, throwing them on the reservation, throwing them off, basically getting them out of mainstream circulation, say, hey, this is a great idea. Now, this is going to offend, I can't tell you how many people. It's going to light up, I can't tell you how many people, if the book isn't ignored and if his movie isn't. But I guarantee you these are just things you don't say. You just don't say them. And, of course, D'Souza is saying these things after having been imprisoned by the Obama administration for this bogus campaign finance charge. The second example of the Nazis adopting leftist Democrat ideas was that Hitler stole the whole idea of segregation from Southern Democrats. See what you think of this.
The Nuremberg laws were the laws that turned Jews into second-class citizens. The senior officials of the Nazi Party get together to draft these laws. There was a transcript made of their meeting because they felt it was a momentous occasion. They were founding the world's first racist state. And then one of the Nazis in the Justice Department, who happened to have studied in America, basically told the Nazis, not so fast, you can't start the world's first racist state because the Democrats in the American South have already done it. He goes, all the things we're talking about, outlawing intermarriage, segregation, discrimination, they already have these laws. They exist. So all we have to do, he said, is take the democratic laws, cross out the word black and write in the word Jew, and we're home free. So the Nazis then began a detailed examination of the Democratic Party laws.
So here's a second example, is that Hitler and the Nazis studied the way Democrats segregated, discriminated against Native Americans, and then African Americans. And the third example, he cites eugenicists and Margaret Sanger.
The Nazis in the 1930s based both their forced sterilization laws as well as their euthanasia laws on the models that had been created by Margaret Sanger. As Margaret Sanger said, more children from the fit and less from the unfit. And that's how she viewed birth control, and not as a matter of giving every woman a choice, but as a matter of convincing the successful and the fit to have more kids, and the unsuccessful, the sick, the imbeciles, and what she considered to be the disposable people, essentially to prevent them from breeding altogether. The other idea that a California eugenicist named Paul Popenoe had proposed, he said, we have all these useless people who are already born. And so it's not enough to have sterilization. We have to have euthanasia. We have to kill these people off. The first people that they killed were not the Jews. They were the sick, the disabled, the group that was called imbeciles. And then later, the Nazi euthanasia program was expanded into Hitler's final solution.
So there you have it. That's a crux of the book, The Big Lie, from Dinesh D'Souza, The Big Lie, exposing the Nazi roots of the American left. Of course, everything he says here is accurate. Whether people want to acknowledge and agree with the connections made, that's going to be another thing. But it's not going to sit well with people on the American left, who, of course, are portraying themselves as the exact opposite of all of this. Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood are perhaps, they're two great examples of historical revisionism, and that is that the Democrat Party, the original racists, the original segregationists, somehow have rewritten history and have ended up seeing themselves portrayed as saviors and rescuers, and the Republican Party, which did not let the Democrats get away with segregation. The LBJ Civil Rights Act 64 would not have passed were it not for Republican votes. The major history revision. So is Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood. D'Souza, and for those of you who are millennials and maybe hearing this for the first time, I want you to not doubt me. Everything you've heard D'Souza say here is accurate. And particularly about Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger, Planned Parenthood was not about choice, and it was not about allowing women to have control over their bodies. Margaret Sanger was the original eugenicist in this. She and many other Americans, she was in Australia, many Americans joined her in this effort of a master race. Margaret Sanger believed in getting rid of the sick, preventing them from breeding, as it's said here. History has revised the original intent and objectives of Margaret Sanger as well, so as to prevent the Democrat Party from being harmed by the actual truth of any of these assertions.